Okay, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. My name is Bill. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a firm called Quick2Bid. We're a technical agency focusing around HubSpot. We do quite a bit with Operations Hub, just like Jason had alluded to, trying to be in that top 10%. Um, we're working also with some other projects around HubSpot in the sales area and things like that. And we've also done a ton of work around configure price quote technology. So product configurators for the manufacturing industry. Um, so that's my background. Um, what we're going to talk about today, this is the first of two talks around the integration dev track. And of the two, this one is much less technical. The idea here is this is something that an admin, just a general admin, should probably be able to accomplish themselves. And so I've structured the presentation to describe that. Um, we'll talk about sort of what the business case was for the particular integration that we're going to talk about and what it was, what the planning and tech stack that went into it, some solution architecture, and then results. And then I'll open it up for questions. So, the business case. Um, this is professional services automation, or PSA, which is a category of software. What we're going to talk about is actually how I'm using HubSpot combined with FreshBooks as a PSA for, excuse me, for Quick2Bid for my company. So this is a smaller integration um, and an integration between, like I said, the CRM that we use for deal management, things like that, and our PSA and our financial software, which we're using for things like invoicing, timekeeping, stuff like that. So the business case was really twofold. One was I needed a clear view of what was going on end to end. Um, so we have a lot of deals that are in pipeline all the time. I needed to have some sort of forecasting mechanism to see how that related to our current project load for our team. And then we also needed some specific reporting capabilities for our partners. So we work with some other software firms as well as subcontractors, and so they need specific reporting on a weekly or monthly basis about what work we're doing. And so using HubSpot's reporting engine to do that was super impactful. So that's what we're doing. So how did we do it? The first thing I did was check the marketplace. This is a live review from last year and not the only one of this type. So oftentimes you'll run into sort of basic or stock connectors like this, the one with FreshBooks. I think it only supports contacts, which is completely useless for what we're trying to do. I'm sure that there are reasons why you would use this integration, but I could not see any. So we decided to go with a more custom approach to do this. And I've seen this quite a few times, and sometimes I think it's limitations with the API, but in this case it wasn't. It was just that the integration is not sort of fully developed yet. It didn't have a lot of installs. So yeah. So our tech stack in this case. So there are some super complex, high quality, high cost middleware solutions out there in the market. You guys are probably aware of some of those. We're talking about Boomi or Workato, these more expensive ones. But in this case, for a company the size of Quick2Bid, where it's 4 or 5 people, we have some fairly simple use cases for it. Really, what I needed was something that could handle a webhook without having to write a webhook in Operations Hub. And that's really something that Zapier is really good at. So our sort of tech stack for this problem statement, we've got our Sales Hub starter. So we're handling contacts, companies, deals. We're using the object library for orders and services. Well, just for services, orders is a standard object now. Using Service Hub Pro for tickets and help desk. Using Zapier for our passing data back and forth. And then we're managing time entries, invoices, expenses, and banking integration, things like that in FreshBooks. So that's our stack to solve the problem. So how did we do it? Um, we could have sat there and written all the Python. We've got a staff that could do that, but AI really is a force multiplier in this area. So in terms of how I actually got this done, I literally just used ChatGPT, prompted it properly. I've got a little bit of experience with the HubSpot API. I know what I'm looking at, things like that, but effectively, ChatGPT can actually write the code for getting something like this done. Um, and so fairly simple integration in that way, and something that I would say is probably the best solution for these types of things. Um, AI is really good at solving small modular problems right now. That's really where it's great. And that's exactly what this was. So, if you're writing sort of simple zaps, somebody's going to be paying attention to the integration the whole time, things like that. This is a really good solution for that. So that's what we did. So in terms of architecture, how we actually set this thing up, um, we have sort of a flow where as we're managing our deals inside of HubSpot, they go into a close one state, which kicks off a simple workflow and creates an order inside of HubSpot. When the order is created inside of HubSpot, it creates and links to a project inside of FreshBooks. So a project is where you track and attribute hours against the work that you're doing for a customer, against a statement of work. And so, you have a certain number of hours that you're working against in FreshBooks, and so we're writing that data back to HubSpot so we can get sort of that view of what's going on. So basically, it just trigger deal is close one, create the order, and then integrate it into the timekeeping software. This design pattern here, interestingly enough, is the same design pattern that you'd use for large integrations as well. It makes a lot of sense to sort of keep your deal and your quotes and all of that information separate from the order, because if I were to ever want to, say, expose this as a customer portal to a user, now I have an order object which is describing what's going on, and it lets me sort of unrelate the sales motion from the delivery motion, which I think is super helpful. So we're doing a bidirectional flow, gives us that unified reporting we're looking for, and yeah, kind of cool. And then the other one that we're doing is time entries. So I have Sales Hub Starter. I don't have Enterprise, so I don't have access to custom objects. So I used a object from the object library called services in HubSpot. So the way it works is that a user can actually go in. So the user in this case is an engineer that's working on a project, and they can go in and actually track time against a service or against a project. When they've tracked that time, it fires off that zap, writes in a service, and then that associates also to the order. So you can sort of see all the services and also report on all of them. And the real reason for all of this, so there's sort of that like 360-degree view. We wanted to see everything, report on everything, but there was a deeper why here. And what that was is that we have these partners that need the information, right? And the reports that were coming out of FreshBooks are more like ad hoc reports. They're not ideal um, for sending information directly to a partner. And so I wanted something that was a little bit cleaner, a little bit higher quality, and also that could handle changing which fields we were actually sending without having to manually update anything in Excel. And so that's what this is. And basically how it works is now that we're passing all this data in, we can email it out and get a report to our partners and customers. And it also is saving me a bunch of time because, and this is just going live like in the next week or so, I'm going to be starting to use this. So this is a fairly new integration. But effectively, prior to this and up until last Monday, I was actually manually pulling reports down from our FreshBooks system modifying them in Excel and then sending them to the customer or to the partner. And that's really tough because it's, another thing that you have to remember to do every week. So I really like the idea of more of a perpetual motion that's running with or without me. So yeah, that's what we're doing. Uh, and that's what I had. We've got a small group here, so I figure we can open it up and if anybody has any questions or anything like that, you know, happy to happy to answer them.
I got a question for you, Bill.
Hi Ryan, how's it going?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. It's good to see this solution built for this was for your use case and your
Mhm.
setup, right? And so I think you're certainly motivated to keep costs low for yourself because you understand your budget, you understand all your requirements. Now, when you're trying to run a business and probably trying to maximize revenue and proposing solutions, how do you approach the conversation? Oh, hey, I'm sorry, but we're going to need to bring in Zapier to do
Mhm.
this, or we're going to need to subscribe to OpsHub to do this. Um,
Yeah,
what does
absolutely.
that look like
So
for you?
I think that the key detail when you're in a sales cycle with a prospect is that they need to understand early that there may be software required. So I found that the biggest challenge is if you are already in the build phase and you've identified that you don't have the proper tooling. So typically, if you explain to somebody you're going to need Ops Hub, you're going to need Zapier, like these things early on in the process, the for most companies, the return on investment of an integration is going to be much higher than the recurring cost of it. And so as long as you're sort of clear up front on what you're going to need, and it's factored in, it's usually fine. It's when you're trying to pull money out of a bucket that doesn't have money allocated, that's when it really, I think, causes the biggest issue. So um, I would say approaching these things with a degree of confidence that you feel like this is what we're going to need, tell them so, and um, it sort of establishes if they have the appetite to do something like this or not, right? Um, so it's I would say my advice is don't feel sorry. Just say this is what it's going to cost. This is why. Um, and if there's a need for it, they'll pay. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And kind of follow up to that is how do you decide between suggesting OpsHub versus going with Zapier? And do you ever find yourself needing both? Because, Zapier is a nice tool, but you can do all the same things in OpsHub, but it might require a little bit more lifting.
Yeah. So I would say that there's sort of a mix on initial PS spend versus operational costs moving forward, right? So for me, like in my business, when I'm looking at this, I chose to pay ARR to Zapier to get this done faster. Um, I also, I'm all about things that sort of function out of the box, right?
Okay.
So, this webhook already exists, right? I don't need to rewrite it. And there's also some polling that needs to happen, which would have meant managing polling workflows for data,
Hmm.
which is a huge pain in the neck. So I think that it's really more about how the client wants to allocate their spend, because regardless, you're going to spend it. See what I mean? Like either the
Yep.
work is done and you're paying monthly for it by Zapier or by another integration, an iPass, or you're having somebody basically write it for you custom in Ops Hub. Um, and so I think it's about, the client understanding that really the costs will occur regardless, and it's more about how you want to allocate those than anything. Um, and
Make
for me in this case, I mean, I'm going to pay what, $50 to $100 a month to do this. Like, I'd rather do that than, my time is extremely valuable to me. So that's
make
yeah,
great. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do you have so you're running, these are the same questions that I run into. I I just had exactly this motion. I just went through this week, so it's funny that you're talking to me about these things. They're I think this type of stuff is happening to everybody. So yeah, cool. Anybody else with questions about what we talked about so far? Okay. Well, I think, a little bit early. I'm not quite sure. I think I planned for 20 and it's been around 20. Um, so I think we could probably kick back to the main room if you guys want to go catch the back end of another one of the sessions. Unless there's anything else.
I mean, I can ask another question, which is like, other than Zapier, are you finding yourself use tools like N8N or Make.com more often these days? Or do you use those, or have you implemented these third parties with any projects you work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I I'm super interested in NHN specifically,
Me too.
um, because I think there's an opportunity that self-hosting capability is really interesting. But it's not something that we've gotten into too deeply yet. Um, most of the most of the projects that we've worked on, we've done with Ops Hub as sort of pure play. Um, and then, there's been some back and forth that has also required some custom coding, like very specifically custom coding, but that's about all. But I think N8N is something that I'm really interested in standing up an instance of specifically for quick to bid.
Ryan, are you using N8N yet? I just started looking at it. It looks like Agent AI on steroids.
I have not, like, I'm seeing it more often.
Yeah.
I just
The bigger,
installed it locally this week and started playing with it. So
that's
I
amazing.
haven't installed it, anywhere to host. You can start it locally,
Mhm.
and you're unlimited if you do that rather than paying the cloud. But man, it looks powerful.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat where I think it's super interesting, and I also think that a self-hosted, or I guess I shouldn't say self-hosted, but um, private cloud hosted instance would be extremely interesting, because I think that we could, there's a possibility for clients where if it's self-hosted, the SaaS fees for it would be dramatically less. You know, hosting something on AWS versus trying to do it with their cloud fees is probably going to be hugely less expensive,
Yeah.
um, which would open up sort of the opportunity for maybe more of a maintenance contract model, um, for
Well, the
people.
other thing I think is interesting about it is I'm not just thinking about HubSpot. You can automate anything out of HubSpot and include HubSpot in it. So I can have an automation that takes stuff from a Google sheet or whatever and brings it in and adds AI to it and then puts it in HubSpot. Or I mean, it's endless what might be able to do. That's just thinking of the ideas or having somebody present the problem to you. And I have my team working on that now, trying to understand what we might be able to do. We just started talking about it this week. That's why I asked Ryan if you, because I see you on the dev Slack all the time. obviously know
I'm
that.
everywhere.
Yeah, I think we've talked before, but
We have.
um, but I think N8N, which I just started watching videos of it, and I didn't start plugging it until this week, but it looks amazing.
Yeah.